This is the man you think so dangerous? This? The man that aspires to be a king? Come. Come, come, come! Now, the leaders of the Sanhedrin accuse you of preaching perverted doctrines. Come. They also say you call yourself the King of the Jews. Well, are you King of the Jews?
If my kingdom were of this world, my followers would have fought to prevent me from being captured.
Oh, you speak of a kingdom. Therefore, you must be a king. Are you a king?
I am. I was born for one purpose. To bear witness to the truth. All who can accept the truth hear my voice.
And what is the truth?
So that's part of the conversation that takes place between Jesus and Pilate. And over the centuries, many theologians and church leaders have discussed this conversation and the meaning of truth in terms of divine authority and human wisdom. Jesus speaks with divine authority, and that form of truth is often referred to as objective or absolute truth. Pilate, on the other hand, is a political operator. His idea of truth is based on human wisdom and reason and political calculation. As a governor, he's concerned to maintain stability within the state and remain in power. His decisions, therefore, are based on what one might call, he's basically trying to please the crowd and the Jewish leadership and that type of thing, rather than do what's right or wrong. His form of human wisdom, therefore, is based on political calculation, which ultimately decides the fate of Jesus. So here we have two men discussing two different concepts of truth, the divine and that which is based on human reason. The theologians and church leaders throughout the centuries have discussed this conversation in depth. For instance, in the 4th century, St. Augustine recognized Jesus' claim to represent absolute truth. On a previous occasion, Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." So Jesus doesn't really just claim to speak the truth, but rather to be the truth. Augustine interpreted truth as the ultimate reality found in God alone. Jesus here represents truth as part of his identity and a central feature of his mission. About 900 years later, there was another great theologian. His name was Thomas Aquinas, and he also analysed this conversation. Aquinas lived between 1225 and 1274, so he lived 49 years in total. He is considered by many to be one of the Catholic Church's greatest theologians. Aquinas believed that Jesus is the ultimate source of absolute truth, whereas Pilate's question represents a form of worldly wisdom, but fails to understand this higher form of truth. So Aquinas agreed with Augustine, but he also went further and claimed that there was three forms of truth. Firstly, in a sense, everything which forms part of God's creation therefore forms part of the truth in the physical sense. Secondly, there's a form of moral truth, or how one lives one's life. Jesus lived a perfect life, and therefore for Aquinas, he represents the fullness of truth in the moral sense. Finally, there is also a truth that the human mind can achieve through reason and logic. Aquinas believed Jesus represented what he called the locus, or divine reason, which is a higher form of truth than human reason. Therefore, there was an inevitable clash between Jesus and Pilate, as divine truth conflicted with the limited reason of mankind, as represented by Pilate. And that, of course, then brings us up to the present age, and the most recent great theologian was Joseph Ratzinger. He passed away a few years ago. He was also Pope Benedict XVI, and he dealt with this key moment in the Gospels as well. Ratzinger seen Pilate's response to Jesus as a reflection of what he called moral relativism, the idea that there's no such thing as absolute truth. Everything is relative. The truth is whatever you say it is. In some situations, therefore, the truth becomes whoever has the most power and influence to impose their own version of the truth. Such is the confusion and chaos of the modern world. When absolute truth is rejected, Ratzinger says, when it's rejected as a standard, the commandments are ignored, and that leads to confusion and chaos, and that becomes the norm. So all the great theologians, from Augustine to Aquinas to Ratzinger, regarded truth as a deeply connected to God, to Christ, and also to salvation itself. And although Pilate's question, what is truth, remains unanswered in the Bible, the Christian tradition says that truth is found in Christ alone, who once said, I am the way, the life, and the truth, and it's the Church's mission to always proclaim that message to the world. So that's it for today. First of all, there were famous theologians in their day and indeed in history. First of all, you had Augustine, who lived in the 4th century. He believed that truth was found in God itself. He spent his life as a philosopher in and out of different cities around Europe and Asia, and testing and looking at different philosophies. But eventually he came to the conclusion that the only real truth was to be found in God itself, and that was expressed in Jesus Christ. Then you had 900 years later. Of course, there was a lot of other theologians as well, but actually just mentioned these three. And in the 13th century, you had Thomas Aquinas, who believed that truth was part of logic and that everything coming from God was based on logic. All reason, all matter, mountains, physical world, the moral world, and all logic was coming from God, and therefore he called Jesus the locus, in the sense that all logic, all reason, everything, Jesus represented truth itself. And then the modern age, you had Joseph Ratzinger, who actually lived through the tremendous chaos in Europe and around the world caused by communism. He was born in 1927, and therefore he lived through both the communist era and the Nazi era, which done tremendous damage to the world. And he recognized that most of these leaders in both communism and Nazism had diverted away from basic objective truth, and they had developed their own form of moral relativism and imposed a kind of a worldly wisdom onto the world and did tremendous damage. So anyway, if you'd like to actually subscribe to the channel, that'd be very helpful to help it grow, and please subscribe and like as well. So thank you very much for watching for today, and goodbye for now.